Job description for a U.S. presidential elector. Pick one. Independent, knowledgeable, discerning judge of character to serve on an elite panel that will choose our next president. Or, dutiful rubber stamp and perfunctory party hack to certify the results of your state's vote. Well, which is it? Mikula here, part 3 of the series Demystifying the Electoral College. In this one, a deep dive on the electors themselves. There's a reason we call electors who go into business of thinking for themselves faithless electors, not heroic electors or conscience electors or Hamilton electors or simply electors. They're called faithless because they're breaking their promise. The thing is, though, our founders never expected electors would come into the job with a promise in the first place. They never expected electors would get the job by pledging to vote for a specific candidate or a specific party. They didn't have parties. They didn't want parties. That was never in the plan. It's what happened, but it wasn't in the plan. The Constitutional Convention considered lots of options for who would vote to pick the president. The people, the Congress, the state legislatures, the state governors. They rejected all of them. They decided instead to create a new kind of official whose sole purpose in life, whose only reason for being, whose only responsibility was to choose a president. But think about it. If all the founders wanted was a rubber stamp endorsing the choice of the people or the Congress or the states or the governors or the legislatures, why go through the charade of choosing electors? So, of course, electors were expected to use their own judgment. The founders didn't want Congress or the state legislatures or the governors making the decision. They thought that would lead to corruption. They wanted the president to be independent. And they didn't want the people choosing because, A, they were wary of the mob, but also, B, it was very hard for them to imagine how anyone could get famous enough to be known by people everywhere in the country. George Washington was. But in the future, how could anybody get to be known by the entire country? Now, we live in a time where teenagers making videos in their bedrooms can become global celebrities. They didn't. They had no mass media, no internet, no television, no radio, no cinema newsreels, no wire service newspapers, no telegraphs. Traveling was hard. No airplanes, no buses, no railroads, no Uber. What they had was horses and carriages pulled by horses. So here's part of the original plan that we tend to forget. There is some evidence that electors weren't actually expected to succeed in their mission all that often. In fact, one member of the convention, George Mason of Virginia, predicted the electors would fail to give a majority to anyone 19 times out of 20. That's a failure rate of 95%. 95%. So why have electors at all if you're expecting them not to elect anybody? I'll get to that. One of the best pictures we have of how the electors were originally expected to function comes in an essay by Alexander Hamilton. I'll tell you what he wrote, but before I do, I need to tell you why he wrote it and when. The new Constitution proposed a radical shift in power from the autonomous independent states to a central government. Not everybody was happy to see that happen. Even today, not everybody is happy to see that happen. As soon as the Constitution was published, opposition mobilized. The new Constitution would not go into effect until at least 9 states ratified it, and people were rallying to oppose it before the ink was dry. So the critical job, after writing the Constitution, after signing the Constitution, was selling the Constitution. And that's where Hamilton re-engaged. He recruited James Madison and John Jay to join him in writing a series of essays called The Federalist. They explained the thinking behind the design of the government. In less than a year, they wrote 85 of these essays. Hamilton wrote most of them. Published in newspapers in New York, then around the country, later collected in book form, still in print. You can read them on Kindle or any web browser. One essay in particular, Federalist 68, by Hamilton, tells us how he expected the electoral system would function. First of all, he assured his readers that it was a great system. Remember, he's selling. He is selling. I love his language. If the manner of it be not perfect, it is at least excellent. Can this guy pitch or what? Hamilton is selling the electors as a group of people who will possess the information and discernment requisite to such complicated investigations. Okay, that word right there, investigations. That's a giveaway. That's the key. It's a very curious word if you think of electors the way we do. In our time, there's no investigations. They just show up and vote and go home. So Hamilton clearly is not talking about a rubber stamp that simply confirms the vote of the people. But what we miss is that Hamilton's not talking about the vote of the people at all. Hamilton expects the people may be voting for electors, but never for candidates. Electors were expected to do all the heavy lifting and figure out on behalf of the voters who should be president. In fact, in New York, Hamilton states, and several others, People didn't vote for president or even for the electors. Not in Hamilton's lifetime. In New York, not even for 5 elections after he died. Electors were appointed by the legislature until 1824. So this notion that electors were like teachers correcting mistakes on student papers just has no foundation in Hamilton. If you read Federalist 68 without expectations or preconceptions, without projecting back on it from what happens today, what you find is a description of electors acting like a corporate executive search committee. They're looking for a new CEO. They're seeking the best candidate. Hamilton wants them to work isolated from partisan and factional and public pressures, even isolated from each other. Well, you might ask, how would 13 independent panels of electors working separately, not working from a list of nominees, manage to give anybody a majority of their votes? And the answer is, they probably wouldn't. George Mason, remember his prediction, 95% failure rate? I think he was optimistic. So what happens when the electors fail to elect? Let's consult the Constitution. If no person have a majority, then from the 5 highest on the list, the said House shall in like manner choose the president. 5 highest? 5? What's going on here? Some scholars think that calling them electors was being over-optimistic. Maybe they weren't really electors, but nominators, like today's national conventions. Most of the time, the House would make the choice. Even Hamilton in Federalist 66 admits elections decided in the House will sometimes, if not frequently, happen. But wait, there's more. In the House, the votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote. Are you following that? Virginia, with 750,000 people, 1 vote. Rhode Island, with fewer than 1/10 as many people, also 1 vote. So there's your big states versus small states right there. All the states are equal, 1 vote each. We think of the election falling to the House as Plan B, an unlikely contingency. But maybe for the founders, it was Plan A. We haven't had an election decided in the House since 1824. And the reason it doesn't happen is simple. After the election of 1800, we changed the rules. The method that Hamilton was so eloquent in praising as, if not perfect, then at least excellent, turned out to be incredibly imperfect, incredibly unexcellent, incredibly vulnerable to being messed with. And Hamilton, as much as anyone, jumped right in to mess with it. It's part of what got him killed. We'll see how in part 4. Party time. Until next time, I'm Mikola. DVD extras. Lots of extras today. I hope you can stick around. A couple of arguments in Hamilton's Federalist 68 seem almost prophetic about the 2016 campaign. He describes the threat that a foreign power might desire to gain an improper ascendant in our councils. How could they better gratify this than by raising a creature of their own to the chief magistracy of the Union? Hello, Putin, so that's what you've been up to, eh? Raising a creature of your own? And this line, talents for low intrigue and the little arts of popularity may alone suffice to elevate a man in the honors of a single state, but it will require other talents and a different kind of merit to establish him in the esteem and confidence of a whole union. Well, we've just witnessed a candidate with extraordinary talents for low intrigue and the arts of popularity. But unlike in Hamilton's day, anyone can now reach the whole union. This is a medal with Hamilton's face on it. It's an award for lifetime achievement given by the Institute of Public Relations. Some people call Edward Bernays the father of public relations. But Hamilton got there first. The Institute website says noted scholars have called Hamilton's techniques of persuasion, his authorship of most of the 85 Federalist papers and their carefully timed release, plus his compelling debates, the finest use of public relations in history. Some century the 18th. Imagine today's politics being conducted by a series of 85 eloquent, carefully reasoned essays, logical essays, instead of angry tweets and 30-second TV ads. But let's not give the 18th century too much credit. They were also given to nasty personal attacks about affairs, mistresses, and lineage. Hamilton's enemies called him in print, Tom Shit. Bye now.